Hey there everyone, so for this brief we're jumping in for the first time into animation. So what we're going to need for that is After Effects. I'm going to go through the basics and necessities and where After Effects sits as a piece of software within the Adobe Suite in the tutorial. For this video we're just going to go through the functionality that's the deliverable for the actual brief. So open up After Effects and you'll be welcomed by, again, a very standard Adobe intro screen, new project and open project and recent projects, and some helpful learnings. We don't want this for now. We're not going to start a new project from here. What I want to first do is have a look at the interface, because it's quite different to Illustrator and Photoshop in that the key component is the timeline and the viewport and the various things that comes with them. So I'll just close this now, and what we can do here is start a new composition from footage, or start a new composition. That's essentially a new video area for various layers for us to edit and cut together. So this is the option to start off essentially a new artboard for our layers to sit on, or one generated out of some footage already. We're going to start a brand new composition. So first I'll just go through everything here though. Here on the left you have your project window. That's where all your layers and, well, all of your layers, but they could be image files, video files, transparent video files, text, audio, sound effects of any kind, any file that has been imported into After Effects will sit here, and this will be drag and dropped and manipulated through the drop downs available with that. On the right of that, you may, if you don't, that's okay, I'll show you how to find it. The Effects and Controls tab on the right of the Project tab, that's where if you apply an effect to one of your layers, this is where the variables to change and manipulate those effects will appear. But right now I just want the Project tab open. Here at the bottom, this entire section here, this long rectangle, it's split into two. On the left, this is where the layers will live. We drag and drop into here, and like Illustrator, like Photoshop, it's hierarchical. The layer on the top is the most visible. Again, it's like sheets of paper layering on top of one another. And then on the right here is the actual timeline. This will be split into a certain amount of time relevant to the composition. We'll make a composition and set things like how long our composition will be, and across here will be the length of time. This allows us to pan into and out of the timeline itself, and then this area here is where the keyframes will sit. What a keyframe is it's a point in time, a point on the timeline that says when something happens to a certain layer or layers. So here on the right, following that, is various windows that come with the essentials layout that we have, various effects and presets, align, things that we're getting quite familiar with now, paragraph, tracker, etc. Again, here up in window, as per usual, everything's set out. We can create our own layout, but for now let's just jump in and create a new composition. So brand new composition. The deliverable for this will be a 1920 by 1080 MP4, and to make an MP4 file, I'll go through that towards the end, as we need another software, but don't worry about that too much right now. It doesn't change what we're doing here. So when it comes to video, things are slightly different. We work in aspect ratio. Sometimes this applies to images. Some people apply it in Photoshop and other image manipulation software. But aspect ratio is extremely important when it comes to video, as it changes the pixel ratio, and it relies on the pixel ratio to apply it to the video itself. It can compress or pull or stretch into a certain aesthetic and feeling for film and video. So here we want 1920 by 1080. Pixel aspect ratio is square. We have a bunch of presets ready and set for, say, cinema or cinematic or widescreen settings or DVD. The frame rate, this is the amount of frames, the amount of images per second. So it's how smooth the animation runs. The more frames, the higher the amount of information within the video. Video and film in itself, video layers and video outputs are essentially images in a sequence. These images are called frames, and then they are played at the speed designated here. So we want 30 frames per second. It's quite a standard setting for here. And then resolution, this is purely for the viewport. This is how what resolution we can see our video in. Don't worry about this because we can have a look at that later. Here is quite important, the start time code. That's where we'd start our composition, but we want that at the very beginning. We want full control of our composition from the beginning. The duration here, this is minutes, this is seconds, and this is milliseconds. We want to work at a 1 minute long piece of footage. We want to create a composition at 1 minute long. The deliverable is 30 seconds, but using a minute gives us room to look around our composition, and we can cut within the composition how much is actually being outputted. So we're going to make a minute, but we're only going to export 30 seconds of it, essentially. So these are the base settings, 1920 by 1080. These should be set automatically, and then please set your duration to 1 minute. Again, this second value here is minutes. So, and a black background, please. So we'll start our new composition, and here it is in the viewport. You can zoom in and out. This again changes the magnification here. And this drop down here is the resolution. It's simply the quality that we see the video while editing. It's not the resolution or the quality, I should say, that it will be outputted as. It's just how we see it in here. So we now have our first composition here in the layers window, the project window, shouldn't say layers, and we are in the view of composition 1, and we can see that because up here in the viewport it says we're in composition 1. Here in the keyframe area, the timeline area, it says we're working on composition 1. When we start to build larger projects, we can have multiple compositions and have them interweave with one another. It allows us to edit a piece of footage and then bring it into another piece of footage and keep things going like that, but we're not doing that here. So what we do want is to now look up here at the main toolbar. Again, it's quite Adobe stock, basic shapes and pens. There's a few other options of camera tools and panning, but what we want to create for this project is a piece of type. So again, click the large T and we'll create a piece of type. We'll just click in our area, and once we click, that creates our first layer. It's down here, it's an empty text layer, and then this is that layer's time on the timeline. It's set automatically to be from start to finish, but we can manipulate that in a second. So I would like my text to say, good afternoon, class. So as per Illustrator, we have a line, so I'd like this nicely centered and centered. Fonts, I have mine keep calm. This is all irrelevant at this point. But what we can now do is we can look at our layer, our brand new layer, and where it sits in the timeline and these various options. So by our layer, there is a drop down, and this lets us manipulate the various properties of our text. We have transform. That again is somewhat like the transform tool in Illustrator and Photoshop, but we have values set to keep it clear, to keep it concise, and we can change the text values. The transform variables are sort of universal. They come with whether you're working with an image or a video, and then you'll get secondary drop downs potentially depending on what kind of layer you're working on. But what we want to do is we want, let's say, to have our text sort of up a bit and to move down. That's all we want. So what we can look at here is in transform, we can take the position. Here it's already set what the position on the screen it is. It should be centered nicely if you've aligned it, and these are the center points. That's the center value. Scale is 100%. We've not rotated it at all, and it's fully opaque. So what we want to do is move our text up a bit. Now we can use these sliders to move it up and down, or we can click and input an amount. So let's say 400. That's quite nice. And we want it at the center when we get to the end. So firstly, as we're going to start using the timeline now, there are three main draggable components to this timeline. There is this top grey bar with two little blue dots on either side. If you grab and pull this in, this allows us to zoom in to the timeline. So as you can see, the seconds here listed are getting further apart. We're simply zooming in. This doesn't change the length of the composition. This doesn't change anything. It's purely for us. And then you can also drag it along and have a look at different points in our timeline. We'll go back to full view. The second main component is this draggable blue arrow. This is what point we're at when playing or viewing our timeline, viewing our composition, sorry. If I'm here, I'll be viewing in here 20 seconds, and right now you can see nothing's changing. We haven't made anything happen yet. And then the third component of this timeline is this. This sets the duration of the render and the play area. So if I was to drag it in to play about 5 seconds here, and then I press space to play, it'll move. This is our current time, and then start again. This is the full play area. If I was to render this video, it would render this work area, this area here. So what we want is a 30-second animation. So I'll drag it to about 30 seconds. It doesn't have to be ridiculously exact. What I may also do is we can see our layer here, our good afternoon class text layer. We can click this layer and we can shorten it. Once the play area gets past it, it is no longer a piece of footage on the screen. So if I drag it here, it's not on the screen. I press play, it appears. There it lives on the screen as the play area goes past it. Let's bring it back. We're back at the beginning. So let's create our first keyframe. So what we want is to change the position from here to, let's say after 15 seconds, it's back in the center, nice and clean. So we select position, and there's a couple of ways to create a keyframe, one of which is to press this little timer here, and that creates our keyframe. And then if we pull away with our viewer, we can see that this indication of whether we're on a keyframe or not disappears. If we go back over it, we're on a keyframe. Go away, we're not on a keyframe. What we want then What this has done then is create a keyframe, create a piece of